Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to the ophthalmology series. My name is Akua Frimpong, and I'm a second year at Larned College of Medicine.
Hi, and I'm Alejandra Rodriguez, and I'm a third year at the University of Rochester.
Thank you. So this series is part of our Sowing Seeds program created by our national president, Osasase Obu, in collaboration with the Alumni and Multicultural Affairs National Committee. Throughout this year-long program, we will provide resources on how to succeed as a pre-med and medical student. And we will touch on everything from financial literacy to preparing for board exams and more. So make sure you are a national member by visiting the snma.org and signing up to stay in the know. So right now I'm going to give an introduction of our panelists. Our first panelist is Dr. Nina Day Brown.
Hi, it's Anita.
Our second panelist is Dr. Nathan Kayonde.
Hello, what's up? Hope you guys are having a good night.
Our third panelist is Dr. Michael Harrell Jr.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining us tonight.
Our fourth panelist is Dr. Atona Jakpour.
Hi everybody, happy to be here.
And our last panelist is Dr. Derek Ansa.
Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in.
Thank you all.
All right, so we're going to start off with some questions here for our first panelist, Dr. Brown, if you will. So just tell us more about where you trained for medical school, where you are now, and about your journey into ophthalmology, as well as why did you choose ophthalmology, and did you have any mentors?
So I am currently in private practice in Atlanta. I work for the Thomas Eye Group. I am originally from California, West Coast. I went to college at Spelman College and Georgia Tech in Atlanta. And then I went to medical school. I started medical school at Charles Drew and then decided to do a PhD program and transferred to Duke. So I finished medical school at Duke. I did my intern year out in California at Santa Clara Valley Medical Center, which is like the county hospital for Stanford. And then finished residency, the last 3 years of residency at Howard University. After that, I did a fellowship in glaucoma, which is the best field. And then I started private practice. Why did I choose ophthalmology? Well, as a graduate student, I started doing research in imaging of the eye. And I realized it was like the best thing ever because we do wonderful surgeries. And we only have to be in clinic. We don't have to be in the hospital. You don't have to see people naked. It's just a great field. After that, I worked abroad. So I've done surgery in Haiti. I've done surgery in Ethiopia, all over the world. My mentors, Leslie Jones, she's the chairman at Howard. She's one of the best mentors that I've had. Tamara Fountain, who's the incoming president of the American Academy of Ophthalmology, has also been a great mentor. So I appreciate you guys having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. And also I want to remind anyone who's tuning in that if you have a question, you can go ahead and put it in the comments and then we'll read the questions to our panelists, okay? All right, for our second panelist, Dr. Nate, if you could also just tell us about your story.
So I'm Dr. Nate, and I went to the University of New Mexico for my undergrad, and then I went to the University of New Mexico for medical school. It was great. In medical school, I didn't know that. I had an idea that I really liked ophthalmology, but I wasn't sure, and I got lured away by interventional radiology. So I was actually going towards that. And then I switched from interventional radiology last minute to ophthalmology after, some soul searching and deciding that, hey, deep down, I really want to go into ophtho. I could talk about that some other time or later for people who are in dilemmas, but for me, it was a great choice choosing ophthalmology. And then I went to University of Hawaii to go do my internal medicine internship. And so I thought I was going to go to Hawaii. I was going to be surfing. I was going to be living the time of my life. And I actually ended up working 80 hours a week. And, it was pretty tough. And so I did my internal medicine internship there. And then I went to Howard University, where I did my residency, my 3 years of residency. And that was good. And so now I was initially interviewing for general ophthalmology jobs early beginning of last year, the end of last year. And I decided that I really wanted to do comprehensive ophthalmology with oculoplastics. I really like plastics. I like the procedures. And so I'm going to be in New Mexico for a year doing oculoplastic procedures and doing a fellowship and learning a lot of oculoplastics from a really talented surgeon that's out there. And so I'm excited about that. Ophthalmology is a great field. Seeing is believing. And when I was a med student, I knew that the ophthalmology was the right path for me. And through all my rotations, I just wanted to get away from doing any rectal exams or anything crazy like that. Ophthalmology is a smooth field. Weekends, in residency, there were lots of weekends that were off, and you're able to kind of, enjoy your life outside of medicine, but also within ophthalmology. But to be honest, it's also challenging. It's also hard because you don't learn ophthalmology in medical school. And so you end up having to do a lot of learning, and that could be a struggle in and of itself. And so the beginning of residency is pretty difficult in ophthalmology, but in the long run, it definitely pays off.
Thank you. Also, so our next panelist, Dr. Michael Harrell Jr. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey into ophthalmology?
Sure. I feel so official, you saying my whole name like that, but I'm sure my mom and dad would be proud. So I am from Texas originally. I went to Morehouse in Atlanta for undergrad and did an early selection program at Boston University. So this is a shout out to anybody out there in undergrad at one of the predominantly minority serving institutions, including several HBCUs like Morehouse and Spelman. It's called the Early Medical School Selection Program at Boston University. So I went to Boston University School of Medicine for medical school, finished in 2014. And while in medical school, I was awarded the Health Profession Scholarship from the United States Navy. So after my general surgery internship at the University of Massachusetts in Worcester, Massachusetts, I went on active duty in the Navy for 4 years, living in Gulfport, Mississippi for my first tour, and then in San Diego, California for my second tour. And during that time, I was a general medical officer doing a variety of things. And some of that included a deployment to Europe. After the Navy, I knew that I wanted to do ophthalmology. I knew I wanted to do ophthalmology in medical school. So the plan was always to do ophthalmology. So I applied for a civilian ophthalmology residency program when I was nearing my end of my time in the Navy. And luckily I matched at Boston Medical Center, which is affiliated with my medical school. So it was nice to come back to the place that gave me my interest in ophthalmology and to see the people who helped to develop my mind for a career in ophthalmology. So as far as mentors in ophthalmology, I was really fortunate. As Dr. Nate said, we don't really learn much about ophthalmology. You don't get a lot of exposure in medical school. So I was lucky to be exposed very early. One of my mentors, Dr. Feinberg, took an interest in me and has really helped guide me through various aspects of this early career that I've had, including going into the Navy and then subsequently matching at BU for residency. So I am in my PGY3 year. I'm doing a whole lot of pediatric ophthalmology right now, but my plan is to do subspecialty training in uveitis and ocular inflammation after I finish residency.
Thank you for sharing. It sounds like mentorship has been really important for a lot of you. So definitely thinking about that for everyone who's listening in. So our next doctor is Dr. Otanya Jakpour. I hope I said that correctly. I'm sorry.
No worries. You were very close. It's Otana Jakpour. And hi, everybody. It's great to be here. And thank you for joining us. So a little bit about me. I grew up in Southern California, went to USC for college where I studied global health, then went to Harvard for medical school, took an extra year between third and fourth year of med school to do a master's in epidemiology at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. And now I'm at the University of Michigan for ophthalmology residency. I'm currently a PGY2, so first year ophthalmology resident. In terms of what led me here, I always knew that I might be interested in ophthalmology. Like, I liked eyes, and I feel like there are kind of two kinds of people in the world. You like eyes or you don't like eyes. And I knew I liked eyes, but I liked everything. I really enjoyed all of my rotations in medical school, particularly ones that were more on the medicine side of things. And so I kind of thought, oh, maybe I'll go into pediatrics or maybe I'll do med peds or something. But then what surprised me is that I enjoyed my surgery rotation a lot more than I was expecting to. And one of the things that drew me to ophthalmology was the opportunity to have both, to get to see patients in clinic, get to know them, establish connections with patients over time, but also to get to work with your hands and have the satisfaction that comes with that. So I think I kind of discovered that over the course of the first few years of medical school, and just trying to seek out opportunities to be more exposed to ophthalmology, because that doesn't always come naturally. And the more I saw of it, the more I liked it. In terms of mentorship, I think that it's helpful to have multiple mentors, like a variety of mentors who can help you in different aspects of things. And I'm really thankful to have had that. One of the things that I wish I had realized earlier was that one good way to find mentors is to ask like your friends and colleagues, maybe people a little bit further than you, who their mentors have been. Like one of my great mentors I got connected with just by talking with somebody from the class above me who had matched into ophthalmology. So yeah, I think ophthalmology is a great field because you get to work with a part of the body that is so resonant with meaning and affects the way people interact with the world. And there aren't a lot of jobs that let you do that.
Thank you for sharing. So another point to highlight is really like early exposure, sounds like. All right, so our next panelist, Dr. Derek Ansa.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Derek Ansa. I'm originally from Ghana, but I grew up in Silver Spring, Maryland, went to undergrad at the University of Maryland in College Park, and then I did medical school at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. And right now I'm a first year intern in ophthalmology at the University of Rochester. So I guess as far as like my journey to ophthalmology kind of started in undergrad almost. I took like a biology of vision course, and that's when I started to get an interest in kind of the anatomy and the physics behind the eye, and did a little bit of research on like mice retina at the time. But I wasn't really convinced that that was something that I wanted to do clinically. It just seemed interesting at the moment. And like everyone mentioned before, exposure was a huge thing that kind of pushed me into deciding to do ophthalmology. So when I started med school, I knew that I wanted to do global health research. And it just so happened that one of the projects that I was working on was a kind of ophthalmology focused project. So I got a chance to go to Tanzania and look at research in trachoma. And it was a great experience for me because I got a chance to see like how these ocular diseases really affect the communities. And it really motivated me to kind of want to do something globally oriented to really help out those kind of communities. And when I came back, I also volunteered with like an organization at my institution called Student Sight Savers, where we'd go out into like the Baltimore community, do vision screenings, and then anybody that we found that had any kind of ocular disease, we'd send them free of charge to see the attendings. And it was a great experience for me as well, just getting a chance to be out in the community, feeling like I'm making an impact. And that was when I started to get a sense of like the different tools and all the cool things that you can do in ophthalmology, and getting in contact with some of the attendings and mentors that I later developed. And like everyone mentioned before, mentorship was a huge thing for me as well. Starting from like my global health mentor to different mentors that I picked up in ophthalmology, they all pushed me and motivated me to kind of pursue that as a residency choice. I love the blend of like clinic and surgery. It felt like ophthalmology had kind of all the best parts of surgery. Like you get to sit down while you're operating. The surgeries are usually a little bit quicker. And then you also get that longitudinal care with clinic as well. So it was like the best of both worlds for me. So it was kind of an easy choice once I got more exposure clinically as well. And then I'll also put in a plug for the AAO, the American Academy of Ophthalmology. When I was starting to get interested in ophthalmology, they had started a minority ophthalmology mentorship program, so MOM. And I was part of like the first class that did it, and they're doing it every year now. And it's a great way to kind of get in contact with like the national organization, find minority focused mentors as well that can help you and guide you along that path. And they helped sponsor like a trip to the American Academy of Ophthalmology a couple of times for me actually to like present as well. So it was a great experience.
Akua, you're muted.
I tend to always do that. I apologize. So we'll start off with some questions. And one of the questions that we have that is definitely important for fourth years are, how was the transition from being a medical student to an ophthalmology resident? And what are some things that you learned about yourself over the year? And I'm going to ask Dr. Brown, do you mind if you can answer those two questions?
I'm old. I've been out of the game for a while now. Medical school, well, I think just like any transition is hard. Just like going from undergrad to medical school is hard. Going into ophthalmology is definitely a transition. I think the hardest part was learning how to do surgery because you're doing microsurgery. The best thing to do is just practice. Usually you have a chief resident or another resident that's higher than you that can teach you how to suture, teach you how to do a really good exam. Yeah, I think that's where you start, is just kind of jumping in, and everybody starts off not knowing. So it's a process for everyone.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
So something that's interesting about ophthalmology that some of the people in the audience may not recognize is that we do an internship that's not in ophthalmology. And there are changes coming down the pike in the upcoming years about how that internship actually looks and pairing it with ophthalmology programs. But you probably heard some of the other panelists talking about what they did for their internship. You know, a lot of people do internal medicine, some people do general surgery, and other people do transitional years. So it's possible that after you finish medical school, you will spend a year as an intern doing something that has nothing to do with ophthalmology. And generally, that year is really best spent learning how to become the kind of doctor that you want to become and learning what it means to have that responsibility that you didn't have as a medical student.
I can speak on that a little bit more because it's kind of where I am exactly right now. So I'm doing an internal medicine kind of internship that also has some components of surgery, because it's, as was previously mentioned, it's part of this new trend towards having a like more integrated program. So like right now I'm on plastic surgery, but I've done like internal medicine as well. And I think one of the hardest parts was adjusting to that new responsibility, shifting from being like a med student and kind of relying on like the people above you to kind of tell you exactly what to do, but you still kind of come up with some of your own thoughts. And then shifting into the role of you being like the primary doctor for patients. And I think the biggest thing that I learned is just always just making sure that you consult with people who are ahead of you when you have any kind of questions, and don't like rely too much on yourself, and make sure that you are open and like humble to listening to others and learning like throughout the whole process, because it's all new and it's going to be new for everyone else around you too.
Jumping onto that, because I can kind of speak to the next transition, which is the transition from intern year to the ophthalmology portion of ophthalmology residency, since I just started that a few months ago. My intern year is also integrated, like an integrated preliminary medicine year at the same institution, which has smoothed the transition in some ways, because I know where I am, I know who to call for things, and I'm kind of settled in that sense. On the other hand, it feels a little bit going back to square one, because the learning curve is so steep for ophthalmology specifically. You know, you get taught a lot of internal medicine things in med school. You don't necessarily get taught a lot of ophthalmology things. That said, it's been also very exciting, because it's fun to get to feel like you're doing what you have set out to do, and like what your goal is to do, you're finally at that stage. And I'm thankful to have a really supportive program and encouraging environment. So it's a challenging transition, but it's good.
Something that a lot of people don't realize is that you essentially do 2 internship years when you go into ophthalmology, because you do internal medicine and then you go do your first year of ophthalmology. And honestly, first year of ophthalmology it's difficult. I thought it was really hard, because you have to be working in the clinic, you have to be answering pages and being on call, and yeah, you have an upper level with you, but you really don't know anything about the eye. I remember being called by the ER, my first few couple of weeks, and just having no idea what to do. And I think the biggest transition is having to learn how to be efficient and to be a resident, and also learn ophthalmology. So a lot of people who are interested in ophthalmology, keep in mind that even though the hours may not be like the hours that people who are working general surgery or neurosurgery are working, it still ends up, in some programs, actually, you still may end up working quite a bit, and call may be really crazy and really busy. But on top of being on call, on top of being tired, you're taking home call. In my program, we're taking home call, which means we don't have the next day off. So if I'm at the hospital at 4 a.m., I still have to be at clinic sometime that morning, and I still have to do my reading later on that day, to catch up with the knowledge that is in ophthalmology. And so I felt for me that was the biggest transition, was having to go through this year of internal medicine. I don't even know the last time I saw a stethoscope, to be honest with you. But it's like a whole year where you just do internal medicine, and then you move on to ophthalmology. And when you go on ophthalmology, that's a completely different challenge. And so I think that's the transition, is having to sort of keep starting over. And then when you get past that, then you get the knowledge a little bit, but then you have to learn how to do surgery, and you have to learn how to operate. And there's all kinds of surgeries in glaucoma and cataract. There's all kinds of things there that you have to master and learn. And so it's definitely a field where you have to be committed to learning a lot.
All right, so our next question is, given the state that we're in, how does one smartly navigate applying to residency programs during COVID-19? Yes, these are definitely unprecedented times, so it'd be interesting to see what you all have to your
Well, the
insights on
first
this.
thing I would say is that a lot of the programs are having these Zoom open house meetings. So definitely attend those. There's a lot of information on the SF Match website. The program directors are really kind of changing the game this year. So they're very open to you guys reaching out to them. So don't feel like you're a bugaboo by emailing people or doing that kind of thing. I think it's really important. And if you are struggling to have ophthalmology experience, definitely reach out to private practice docs like myself. We have the opportunity for you guys to shadow and do research projects with us.
I want to say, while it is more difficult to do some of the things that people would normally do to prepare applications and to be as competitive as possible, there are so many creative ways to still get a lot of those things done. There are creative ways to do research projects that are meaningful and useful that can be done virtually without ever stepping foot in a hospital. Creative ways like Dr. Brown was just saying to get shadowing and mentorship experience with people who can write you really good letters. And now there are creative ways to visit the programs that you're interested in. I was just in a resident meeting today for my program, and we were talking about the idea of creating a video to virtually introduce applicants or interviewees to our clinic and our hospital and our ORs. And we were talking about doing an open house and like the pre-interview dinner, but doing it virtually with residents involved. So just as interviewees and applicants are having to be creative about making sure that they're as competitive as possible, the programs are also having to be super creative and figure out ways to present themselves in the best light so that they can get the best fits for them as well.
And I would add, like, one of the hard things about not being able to physically go to the like residency places is that you won't really get a great sense of like the kind of fit and the vibe at each of these institutions. Of course, there'll be like videos and Zoom conferences and things like that. But I think probably the best way of really getting that sense is if you know anybody at any of these institutions, just like reaching out to people that you know have gone to certain places and seeing what their opinions and kind of how they feel about the program, just to get a little bit more insight as well.
I still think that if your mentors, whoever your mentors are, that's really important. I've always found that in ophthalmology is a very small field, and it's almost like everybody knows each other in some kind of way. So if you have a mentor that is really involved, or a mentor that can kind of speak for you, or make some calls for you, I still think those rules still kind of apply. And in a field like ophthalmology that's small, someone writing you a great letter or someone making a phone call for you makes a very big difference. And I could tell you, having been behind the scenes to some degree, I've heard definitely people getting interviews because a very prominent ophthalmologist or an ophthalmologist that was tied to the program recommended someone, because recommendations are taken very highly in ophthalmology. And so one of the things you can make sure to do is not only show your face at whatever video conferencing that exists, but you can also have your mentor or whoever is the people who are helping you kind of speak for you. And then you can also reach out to residents. People reach out to me on DM, on Instagram, wherever. They ask me questions about ophthalmology, and they ask me questions about being a resident, at Howard. And so there's a lot of ways you can still connect with people and try to get as much information as you can about the program. I think the best way to do it is to find people who were in that program, and they can tell you a lot about a program if you're really interested in that. So that's kind of my 2 cents.
I would echo all of those things. And then the one other thing I would add, and this is easier said than done, I think, but if you're in the application process, it's a stressful process at the best of times, and especially so when you're hearing lots of people saying things about, oh, like last year it was like this, but this year this is happening, and making comparisons and reading into details when no one necessarily really knows. And so if you can do your best to try to keep your eye on the prize and not get too distracted or worried about comparing this current situation to how things have been in the past, it might be better for your peace of mind. But I know it's easier said than done.
So I have a question, and anyone can answer this question, but in your residency, how did you guys kind of figure out like what specialty or what specifically you wanted to narrow your field in?
For me, I wanted to take care of Black folks. So glaucoma is 4 times more likely in African Americans. And so we have an underserved population that I knew I could treat and take care of well. I also really enjoyed cataract surgery. So if you go into plastics or retina, you don't really get a chance to do a lot of cataract surgery. And I mean, the cataract surgery is like the bread and butter of ophthalmology. So you can do it anywhere, and people are so happy. It's like the joy that they have from being able to see is spectacular. And I just think that there's nothing else like that. So I chose to specialize in glaucoma, but I definitely still enjoy doing cataract surgery.
I can go next. The answer to that is I'm a PGY3, and some of my co-residents still don't know what they want to do. So it's different for different people. I am the type of person who loves to have a plan and needs to be working towards a goal. So I sat down and thought really hard earlier, actually at the end of the first year, and kind of narrowed down things that I liked and didn't like. I decided that, no offense, Dr. Brown, I don't really love glaucoma. So I decided I didn't want to spend my life doing glaucoma. But I do really like the interplay between ophthalmology, internal medicine, more specifically like rheumatology and infectious diseases, kind of tropical medicine things. I like the idea of using immunomodulatory therapy and kind of traditionally chemotherapeutic drugs to treat ocular inflammation. I like solving the puzzles that come with uveitis. And then a big part of the uveitis training that I want to get is doing complex cataract surgery as well. So another huge part of that was finding a person in my department with whom I loved working with whom I loved talking about eyes with and learning from. So when you rotate through all of the different subspecialties, and there are like 10 or more subspecialties in ophthalmology, for those who didn't know, you'll start to kind of pick, what kind of things you like, who you like being around, what type of specialists in general you like chatting with, and kind of, as one of my mentors describes it, you'll find out who your people are. And that's how I chose.
I think that's I think that's a great question, because a lot of people, when they think about ophthalmology, they don't think about the subspecialties. And so, interestingly, in my class, the other 2 former residents, they went into comprehensive ophthalmology. And I think that the reason why I decided to choose going towards the oculoplastics route, I think a lot of times it's because of your mentors and who you look up to, and your experience. To be honest, for a lot of us, if we had a mentor in glaucoma that kind of brought us in, and we liked glaucoma a little bit, just a little bit more than something else, we ended up in glaucoma, or we ended up in cornea. And I think for me, just working with Dr. Earl Kidwell, who works at Howard and at Hopkins, and just when I was in the plastics OR with him, that experience with him was just different than when I was with anyone else, or when I was with any other specialty or field. And I felt different when I was doing oculoplastic surgery as opposed to glaucoma. And I know I heard my man's doing uveitis, so everything that's birdshot and, you know, mudes, we're going to send your way. And to be honest, I think a lot of people, they experience certain experiences with some attendings and some mentors, and that leads them a certain way. And for me, I felt I vibed with other oculoplastics people. I enjoyed doing the surgeries, and I really didn't see myself doing anything else if I were to specialize. I liked comprehensive ophthalmology. I like cataracts as well, but I think for me, I enjoy the artistic nature of it, and I think there are a lot of experiences in my residency where I published a case report recently in plastics. And I would have to say, definitely, Dr. Kidwell being that mentor, and so many people, if they haven't thought about plastics at my program, they definitely considered it because of him and how great he was. And so I think mentorship is a big part of choosing your specialty. I think your experiences and who gave you advice, how your OR experiences were, make a big difference. I went to a place where glaucoma was serious. The patients had really serious glaucoma, and it wasn't like a walk in the park, right? So you had to really love glaucoma to manage the post-op, to really take care of those patients. And so I think for me, just being able to kind of gauge different specialties and the different patient populations and my personality, I was able to navigate towards what I wanted to do.
I am still figuring out what my path will be and keeping an open mind. I'm early on, so it's fine. But I just think that this conversation highlights how much variety there is within ophthalmology, which I think isn't something people necessarily expect, because it's like, you're already focusing on such a small part of the body. How can there be that much variety? But there really is, with all these different subspecialties and with comprehensive. There's variety in the types of surgeries. There's variety in the kinds of management the conditions entail. There's variety in the patient populations. Even, you know, like for me, I really enjoy working with kids, which is part of why I thought maybe in med school that I would end up going into pediatrics. But you can work with kids in ophthalmology, in pediatric ophthalmology, or even in some of the other subspecialties. And so there's really a lot of options, even within such a small part of the body.
Okay, so we have another question here from John Jackson. Can you explain how matching works for ophthalmology? How do SF match and matching for Interneer work?
Yeah, I guess I could tackle that one. So for ophthalmology, it's considered an early match, and it's a totally separate program, the SF match versus what everyone else uses, which is ERAS. So the SF match, it opens up usually like about a month early compared to like the general match that everyone else goes through. And the benefit of that is actually that you match earlier than everyone else. Like usually you find out like right in the beginning of February. And when I applied, it was still separate in terms of you matching into an ophthalmology program, which is you matching as a PGY2. And then you have to apply separately for an Interneer program, which I still believe is the case at most places. They're starting to transition towards integrating a lot of programs, but I think for the time being that you still have to apply separately. So I applied into the SF match, found out I matched into Rochester, and then they had given me a spot pretty much already guaranteed for the Interneer, and I just had to like submit an application after I had already found out that I had matched into the general match, and then it was just pretty much guaranteed.
I think this year is a little weird. I think you can only apply to 10 programs. I mean, I'm sorry, you can apply to a whole bunch of programs, but you can only interview at 10 programs. And you really have to do your research on the programs. Just like he was saying, some of them are already integrated. And applications are due like now. So if you're a fourth year, you should be applying right now. I think next year they're gonna open the application pool in like July, but they delayed it a little bit this year. So it's one of those things where you need to put your application in as soon as possible, because that's when they start pulling people to interview. The other thing is a lot of people don't have great USMLE scores. So if you don't have a good USMLE score, I think I had like a 215 on step 1. I highly suggest you do research. It'll teach you the language of ophthalmology. It'll give you some mentorship. So definitely that's a big part of the application, especially in ophthalmology.
We have another question. So other than doing research, what are ways someone can show that they are serious about otolaryngology?
We're ophthalmologists. We're not ENT, but that's all right. Okay.
Oh man, oh man.
Well, I would say the
man.
biggest thing that I tell like medical students is, do some free clinics, do some outreach. There's a program called the Rav Venable program where you can present your research as a medical student. We'll fly you out. I'm the chairman of the National Medical Association, which is like the big brother to the to the SNMA. So definitely participate in that. Students do they start their own community eye clinic. They do Sight Savers. They do Unite for Sight, which is a program you can go abroad. Any kind of experiences to just really show that you have had exposure to ophthalmology. I think that's probably where you want to start.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think there's ways to, it's weird because my advice is a little different during this COVID time, but traditional things that I remember that helped me was I worked in a mobile vision clinic. So we'd go to different small towns and we would, kind of check their visual acuity. We had tons of donated glasses. We would auto refract people and then see what try to match the glasses to their, to what the auto refractor was. And then we did like free retinal exams. And so we did that as medical students, and that was great exposure. And then other things you can do is when I was a resident and I was busy and I was trying to learn surgery and trying to keep up with clinic, I loved when a medical student would say, hey, I'm looking for research because, that's perfect because I have tons of research or tons of opportunities for you to get involved in. So residents are great resources because they have a little bit more access into the opto world. And so they may know more about what research is going on, and they're a little closer to you in age and experience. And so they may be a great resource in regards to figuring out what research to do. I know that there was a med student that worked on a project with me, and even before she got into ophthalmology, she was already published. So it's a nice thing to do and to partner up with someone. And those are the things, I know you mentioned outside of research, but volunteering is a big thing. And it's a huge deal. And I still, again, I can't emphasize the importance of having a mentor who can speak for you, who can fight for you. I'm telling you, it doesn't seem like it makes a big difference when you're in med school, but it's a huge difference when someone says, hey, I know so-and-so, and they're a great applicant. You should definitely consider and check them out. So definitely tap into your mentors and ask them for advice as well.
So
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like Dr. Brown was saying a few minutes ago, with regards to kind of offsetting a low board score, you really have to do some other things that are going to make your application stand out. So if you don't have a lot of research and you're applying, well, applications are due now. So if you are lacking in research and you're looking for other things, one of the things that made me stand out was my leadership. I had done a lot of work with the Student National Medical Association when I was in medical school. And that work continued after I finished medical school. I was in leadership on the local, regional, and national level throughout all of med school. So I could demonstrate that and I could talk intelligibly about my experiences and what kind of things I learned from that. And then also I did something that was very different from most of the other people applying. I was in the military for 4 years on active duty, deploying and taking care of hundreds of sailors at a time as the only doctor there, running a medical department. So these are all things that made my application stand out, even if I, wasn't published in 40 journals and, didn't have a 270 on step one.
What I was going to say was, in terms of mentorship, the reason why it's so important is because the programs are so small. So you have programs that are like 3 people, 2 people, 5 people. And so they really don't want like stranger danger. They don't want somebody coming to their program that they haven't really, heard something about. They really want to make sure that it'll be an easy transition, that they'll have somebody that'll show up on time and answer their page and, treat the patients well. And, that's just going to mesh really well. So I think that's why it's so important for you to work with someone who can vouch for you.
In terms of doing things to bolster your application, research, and otherwise, I think that it's important not to be afraid of taking the time you need. I know not everyone is able to do an extra year, and it's certainly not necessary, but I think it can provide a little bit of breathing room to get in some of those experiences that you want to get in to show that you're really engaged and interested in ophthalmology. Especially because there's kind of limited exposure to ophthalmology in medical school. A lot of people don't really know they want to go into it until a little bit later. And then at that point, it can feel like you're scrambling to fit a bunch of stuff in. So I know that the journey is long. An extra year is not going to necessarily make it that much worse, and it could really help you start out on the right foot.
I think one thing that I would also add when it comes to applying, also don't neglect the hobby section of your application. I think that's another way some people can stand out once they've shown that they've been interested in ophthalmology. It could be something that could be the topic of your interviews. I know when I was interviewing a lot of the programs, like when I went for my interviews, we would just talk about the different hobbies that I do, like music or poetry or just writing in general. And I think a lot of programs are also looking for people who are kind of interesting in that sense. And it is a way to stand out and show that you're unique in a different way as well.
I definitely agree with that, because there are definitely a lot of applicants that come in and you'll just hear the coolest hobbies that they have. And sometimes if the attending, at Howard, we sort of had a panel interview. And if one of the attendings had something that was similar to something they did, that would definitely be an instant point of connection. And to be honest, I think on my interviews, I spent more time talking about my hobby section than anything else. I think they asked me about my salsa dancing or intramural basketball championships. So I spent more time talking about my hobbies and kind of who I am, more so because they saw everything else on the application. So I think that's actually a good point.
All right, next question. Real talk. How does one stand out on a Zoom interview? That's a great question. Anyone want to take it away?
So definitely clean your room and do your hair, wash your face, be presentable, wear a suit, all the way. I think the other thing is to smile and be engaging, look at the camera. Don't be looking down, checking your phone, really engage and try to have a conversation. Definitely do mock interviews. We have so many different mock interview programs. There's one through the SNMA. There's one through the NMA. So practice. Don't just show up like brand new.
And if you're not wearing a suit all the way, don't get up, don't stand up. You know, that's a big mistake.
I was just going to say, be prepared. Like Dr. Brown said, do the same kind of preparation that you would do before. You know, figure out who you're going to be interviewing with. Take some time to figure out what they do. Maybe even look at their research interests. All this stuff is available on their department's website. You can read all the stuff that they've published in their entire life, probably. But just kind of know, who is this person? Where are they from? Is there some connection that I can pull on, like Nate was just saying? But do the same kind of preparation that you would do, and then that conversation will kind of more naturally flow.
And along with that, make sure you do your research also on the program. Know some things about it that, I mean, you can go on their website and get a ton of information already. So definitely making sure that you're very familiar with the program and come prepared with some questions as well.
And in terms of the Zoom part, I think one of the keys to trying to shine in an interview is to try to take away distractions, right? So if you have like a distracting background, if you're having technical difficulties, if your mic is super quiet and they can't hear you, those are all things that are barriers, but they're also very fixable. And if you address those things, you can feel more comfortable in your interview and also shine better.
Okay, we have time for one more question. So, did you all apply to ophthalmology only, or did any of you also apply for another specialty as well?
I can answer quickly. I only applied to ophthalmology.
Same.
Yeah, I only applied to ophthalmology, but I know some people who did apply for like ophtho and like another application that was in like ERAS. So it is possible. You'd have to go on a lot of interviews, though.
I only applied for ophthalmology, but you got to be really careful about that, because you got to get letters of recommendation that make sure they say ophthalmology and not whatever other thing. And, you know, you have to be very organized if you're going to do that. And the other thing is, you know, if you don't match in ophthalmology, you still have a little window of time to scramble into our internal medicine or ER. And I know people that have done that, and then they do their intern year, and then they find a program later. So it's not the end of the world if you don't match. Like, you know, this is a job, so you got a lot of living left. It's not the end of the world if you don't match. Like, people still, they're still going to be a doctor, and you're going to be okay. So all these little bumps along the way, like, I'm at the end, I'm okay. I work like 8:30 to 4:30. I do surgery, you know, twice a week. Like, I get paid really well. So it all works out.
Yeah, so I interviewed, so I mentioned earlier in the talk that I had initially also been interested in interventional radiology. And so I actually, you know, it's kind of a long story, but essentially I by the time I was also applying to ophthalmology, I had already had, you know, letters in interventional radiology. You know, I applied to both, and my thinking was, okay, if I don't match into ophthalmology, then I'll just go into radiology. And so I had interviews at direct interventional radiology programs. I had interviews at, you know, radiology programs like, you know, all over the country, USC, you know, everywhere. And it just became, and then you had to interview for your prelims. So it just became way too much. It was just like at an interview, you know, if you're at a prelim interview, what do you tell someone when they say, okay, well, hey, Mr. Prelim, what are you going to do next year? And so you really have to be, it's really complicated. And I think it's easier if you're applying to ophthalmology and just something that doesn't have, you know, a prelim year, like just internal medicine or something else. But it is complicated. And I think that you should just, you know, in hindsight, I would just say, just have faith. I think a part of me was, I had that fear, that fourth year med student fear of what if I don't match, and what if I have to go work in car insurance, and I have to do something completely different, and I get stuck doing something I don't want to do. But and fortunately for me, I liked both fields, but I just really wanted to do ophthalmology. So I literally just dropped my interviews for radiology. I didn't go on any more. I didn't go on any anything else. I just focused on ophthalmology, and I just had faith that I was going to match. And so for somebody that wants to do both, especially if you're doing two competitive specialties, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't suggest it. It's just more stress. It's more money. It's more expensive. And if you know what you want to do, just go for it. And that's why I'm passionate about helping people choosing their specialty, because I know that I had gone through some things, especially during the interview period. But it is definitely, you never know what's going to happen. So just have faith and be confident.
All right, thank you all so much. And before we wrap up, if you all could just give us one line of wisdom for all of our listeners.
So I just want to thank you guys. You did such a good job organizing us. And my one line of wisdom for wherever you are, the residents, the future fellow, the medical students, the pre-meds, is just keep showing up, okay? So no matter what is going on, just keep showing up and you will have a breakthrough. Just keep showing up.
So my one-liner is just keep your eyes on the prize. A lot of things will come up. You'll be people will distractions. People will say it's hard to match. You have to have this step score. You have to do this. You have to do that, and it can get overwhelming. And I think especially if you're going into ophthalmology, keep your eyes on the prize. It's worth it in the end, and it's going to be hard, but you can do it. You can get through it.
I guess my one line of wisdom is grind now so you don't have to grind later. If you put in the effort now, you think you're doing enough, try to do more. And this goes for studying for step 1, step 2, doing the research, building up your application. If you think you're doing enough now, try to do more. It'll pay off later.
My line of wisdom would be don't close doors on yourself, by which I mean, I think sometimes there are certain specialties or certain areas where maybe you don't see people who look like you. Maybe you haven't thought about that as a possibility for you, but there's no reason why it shouldn't be you. Like, why not you? So don't be the one to stop yourself from having the opportunity to achieve those dreams.
I guess my one line of wisdom would be don't be afraid to ask for help. Everyone faces challenges and obstacles along their road. And the important thing is getting help when you need it and finding mentors, finding people to support you throughout this whole process, because it's possible and we're all evidence of that, and it's something that you can do too.
All right, thank you again to our amazing panelists. Thank you for telling us about your journeys and about this wonderful field of ophthalmology. We appreciate your support of the SNMA and our membership. And to those in the audience, please scan a QR code that will pop up on the screen. There it is. It's also located in the chat. It's to give us some feedback as to how this programming went. Any feedback would be really helpful for us. Thank you again for joining us. I encourage you all to follow us on Instagram at SNMA_official, on Twitter at SNMA, and like us on Facebook. But most importantly, if you're not a national member, please visit our website at snma.org to sign up and get connected. Thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing all of you in our upcoming Sowing Seeds webinars. We have our next Sowing Seed episode on transplant medicine on September 16th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and then a following episode on pathology on September 23rd at 8 p.m. Thank you again for everyone for tuning in and our wonderful panelists for telling us about ophthalmology.